I finally decided it was time to play Bethesda's next great creation, Starfield. And today's video will be my initial impressions as I talk through my first 10 or so hours of the game. I've gone through a couple of the main missions. I've done a lot of ancillary missions, met most of the companions, and I have a pretty good feeling for where this game is largely trying to go. Now, I gotta say that I waited initially because I didn't want to be a paying beta tester. And I know that Bethesda games come out not quite ready. And even though Starfield had been hyped as the next big thing, as the ultimate creation that Todd Howard has been working on his entire career, I knew the game would not be ready. And while I did see my fair share of bugs and glitches and nonsensical, weird glitch type things at the beginning of the game, most people said it was actually a very relatively stable Bethesda game, which actually gave me a lot of excitement and something to look forward to. But despite all that, I did go ahead and wait a couple months after launch. Now that the Game Awards have died down and the hype for this game has died down, I thought it was time for me to check it out for myself. And I'm glad that I did. I'm really, really enjoying the core experience of this game. There's definitely a lot of room for improvement, things that will definitely not be fixed in this version of the game, things that would require massive reworks of some of the existing systems. But what I can say ultimately is that it is as good as a game as you put into it. And I know that probably sounds weird as a review, but I can tell you that if you take your time and you explore and you really kind of work through the systems, I think you'll find a lot more enjoyment than somebody who's just fast traveling from point to point to point. The main point of contention of this game being the fact that it's not seamless. There is a lot of loading screens. There is a lot of gating that requires you to work through various systems and menus and interfaces in order to successfully navigate from one planet to another. That is a massive oversight. If this game had free traversal like No Man's Sky did, for example, where you could get in your ship, fly and leave orbit and the atmosphere, get into orbit, go to other planets and land on them in all one seamless motion, this game would be so different. Especially if you had that layer of that kind of Bethesda charm where there's tons and tons of interactable objects and little kind of story missions and side dungeons and caves and strongholds and etc. to explore. This game would have been so much better. But unfortunately, probably due to the limitations of the Xbox Series X, which I will talk about in a moment, this game forces you to basically fast travel everywhere or get a loading screen. So you walk into your ship, you can freely walk through your ship. There's all your crew talking about. You can look at all your consoles and gauges, which are ridiculously modeled, down to the rivets, down to the little text on each of the buttons. It is really a masterclass in attention to detail. You walk through your ship, you sit down in the captain's chair, you pull the console towards you, and all you have is a button that says take off. Then the screen fades out, fades in, now you're in outer space. You can press a button to scan the planet that you were just on or go to any other planet that you're nearby by clicking it on your interface and hitting travel now, and the game just beams you there. And again, another loading screen. If you find a spaceport out in the middle of nowhere and you want to dock up to it, you can't fly into it. You have to fly near it and then hit a button. Another loading screen that'll take you to that piece of it. It's all these little transition things that Bethesda really overlooked that I think is the joy of exploration. And in a game like this with zillions of procedural planets and so much to see and do, it sure doesn't feel that way because you're going to see the same few cutscenes over and over again. When you explore after like one or two planets that are kind of off the regular path, you're not going to do anymore because they're very boring. There's not a lot of stuff to see or to loot. There's no really unique enemies or weapons or any story beats. The way that you had those really beautifully handcrafted dungeons in games like Oblivion and Skyrim are absolutely missing here. Instead, you're just going to get these generic installations that have some random amount of pirates walking around that you can kill and loot, and on your way. There's really no missions or story beats or any kind of artifacts or anything that's going to lead you on a larger narrative than that. It is solely something to go do when you're bored. And because of how this game is structured and the sheer amount of actual fun content, at least so far, in the story and in some of the ancillary factions that you can start to work with, and a lot of the side missions that you'll take on just by being in the world, there's really no reason to go do those things. So a large part of this game and a large selling feature of all those planets does seem kind of meaningless and boring, which is unfortunate, because when you strip that away, this game didn't need to be in outer space. And it definitely didn't need to give you some illusion of control when there's clearly not much to be had at all. Now, when I said earlier about this game is what you put into it, by taking your time and walking around the built cities, not the procedural stuff, walking through your ship, walking through the town, not sprinting or fast traveling everywhere, you're going to hear a lot of conversations which will inform you of things to do around the world. You're going to hear other characters talking about you and your exploits and just the state of the world they happen to be in, or complaining about something. And it does play out into meaningful outcomes, which I really appreciated. So I think they did a phenomenal job of that world building in that regard, where you're going to feel like you are part of a larger environment and you are part of a larger society. All the major towns you go to, with all the NPCs walking around and talking and randomly running up to you to give you missions and kind of swarming you and being part of the experience, seeing people sit down and order drinks and seeing vendors selling wares to other people, is all absolutely part of this world. And by stopping and kind of taking that in and talking with people, you will uncover more of the game. And I really did like that. That really does resonate for an RPG in a way that all of the planet building kind of failed. I think they got it right on the social, the social side of things, which is awesome. So my recommendation, if you are playing this game, is to take your time and don't feel like you have to blow through everything. Just walk around, look around, loot, explore, and you will be rewarded in so many more ways than I think a lot of other people who are just like speedrunning this game would be. Another big recommendation, do not play this on Xbox Series X, or I assume Series S looks probably worse because it's a less powerful piece of hardware. Absolutely disappointing. The reason why I initially tried this on the Series X was because I figured with outer space, you'd have a lot of vibrant darks, particularly in, the solar system, and navigating around, fighting these larger than life aliens and these crazy spaceships and all these weird environments you'd be in. And I really thought an OLED display with true darks would look amazing, and it doesn't. This game is a very grainy look to it on console. It definitely struggles to maintain a smooth presentation. The aiming doesn't feel quite right. It just looks and feels like a Nintendo Switch game on steroids, which is so unfortunate. Why this game was not really designed for the hardware it had is beyond me. Now, playing it on PC, the footage you're looking at here, ultra wide, 60 frames a second, very smooth, high detail, lots of attention to all the artifacts and special effects that had to be removed to make concessions to run reasonably well on a Series X are all on full display here. I would not play this game on a console. And for a lot of people who are only able to play this game on a console, I would tell you, you are absolutely missing out on a definitive experience by playing it on a PC. I know that's true with a lot of games. I know a lot of people say, well, the PC version is better. It's higher frame rate. It's ultra wide. It loads faster, etc., etc. All true. But I think in a game like this particularly, go look at comparisons between what you would see on a console versus what you would see on a PC. And I think you'll come to the same conclusion I did, that this game just does not look or run well on a console. I would not recommend playing this on a console. And that's really a major oversight. If the space travel was the biggest oversight of this game, the second biggest oversight of this game was not making it run well on its home console. And I think a lot of people are going to be turned off by how poor the performance is, by how long the loading screens are, and by how just gritty and ugly and painted and kind of cobbled together this game looks on console. Again, another major oversight. Now, everything else that you expect from a Bethesda game is on full display here. The mass amounts of looting, the environmental storytelling in the main set pieces, going into nice handcrafted dungeons that actually are part of the main narrative of the game. Seeing what happens, seeing all the different things that you can loot, being able to read data logs, being able to hack into doors and read computer files and talk with people, boarding ships and talking with and commandeering those or trying to negotiate with other pirates is all in just spades here. And it's so good. It runs so well in that respect. You will feel like a really polished Bethesda game. Having a companion with you, taking on mission quests while your companion will interject during the discussion is awesome. Each companion will say different things, which will kind of set the narrative of some of those levels differently. Your adoring fan will speak differently to some of the NPCs you're dealing with than your Vasco robot will, for example. And I love that. It does add a sense of replayability. It does add a sense of excitement because you're not really playing this game alone. Your companion is a part of you. And depending on the actions you take, whether they like you or dislike you, will change the things they say to you. I've had my companion yell at me because I was picking up too much loot or spending too long in an area looking around for more things to do instead of moving on to the next area. I've had a companion walk over and randomly give me something. I've had companions pick up weapons from enemies and use them as their primary weapon because they were stronger than what they had. The AI system in this game is awesome. And I think it points back to what I said earlier about those vibrant towns and cityscapes. This world feels alive. And even though it is a single player game, your companion is going to make it at times feel like a co-op. I was really surprised by some of the things my companion said and did and some of the ways they drove some of the story. And I thought it was in a very creative way. And I'm really happy that Bethesda's invested in that tech. And I can't wait to see what they do with that going on to games in the future. Starfield is by no means a perfect game. There's definitely a lot to be desired here. But if you're a fan of that Bethesda experience, of that kind of arcane experience where you're going to walk around and you're going to get lost in the world and lost in the story, this game will absolutely deliver. You will be frustrated by the travel. You will quickly fade off from exploring all these random planets that don't really have a lot to see or do, but you will absolutely fall in love with the characters and in the mission. And that's what's keeping me driving playing through this game, despite some of the other problems. The overloaded crafting system, the bloated inventory system, the difficulty in trying to build your own ship, and sometimes understanding where you're supposed to go in terms of the world and what you should be investing your skill points in and how you should be building your character. All of those things are in play, and they all do take away from the experience at times. But the really good narrative and those fun moments when everything comes together in the world and you feel like you're a part of a simulated environment, that to me overtakes any other negative criticism I have about this game. And that's why I like it so much. I'll probably do a video at some point later on in the future, giving some like final thoughts as I wrap up the story. I expect, as I have seen so far in this, I'm going to pretty much golden path this. There were some side missions. There's one in particular that I'm somewhat invested in that I'd like to see through to the end. But for the most part, I think the main story is probably what I'm going to invest most of my time in, largely because I have a massive backlog of other games to get to, but because I don't necessarily feel rewarded for taking my time and exploring all these little nooks and crannies. It just ultimately usually gives you more generic weapons and more credits, and that's not something I'm really struggling with in the game. So I think I'm just going to kind of stick to the main narrative focus and kind of flesh out some of the companions, maybe build a slightly bigger ship so I can get some more people on. But short of that, I don't see this being 100 or 1,000 hour game in the way that Skyrim was, or the way that Oblivion was, or the way that Morrowind was, where I wanted to explore every corner of the map and check out every single dungeon and read every single note and just kind of embrace the world. I don't see that happening here, because of some of the hollow content that isn't part of the main path. But again, despite all that, I think Starfield is absolutely worth your time, and I absolutely recommend you check it out. Thank you guys so much for watching. Take care of yourselves, and until next time, I will see you guys on the other side.